If you will, take your Bibles, turn me to Mark chapter 9. Mark chapter 9. A couple of months ago, I think it was in Matthew, I talked about the Transfiguration, so we're going to skip that one because we've already kind of discussed it. So we're going to pick up back on verse 14, chapter 9 of Mark, verse 14. And when he came to the disciples, he saw a great multitude around them, and the scribes disputing with them. Now Jesus and 3 of his disciples had been on the mountain, and when they come down, they see the other disciples, some of the scribes, and here is a big crowd that has gathered listening to the disciples and the scribes arguing. Now, when we were in school, I'm sure this happened at your school just like it did at mine, but if there was a fight, I guarantee you there would be a crowd. It didn't take but a few moments for that crowd to come see what was going on. Somebody had a wreck at Snook School the other day, early that morning. And before you know it, it's dark. We got a crowd out there, but we have to break up because people are trying to see what's just happened. Well, this is what's happening here. The crowd is gathered, and the disciples that were left, the 9 disciples, are talking with the scribes. They're arguing with them. Now, what are they arguing about? I'm pretty sure. Now, we don't have a really idea of what they're arguing, but I kind of know how people are, and I got a feeling that the scribes were saying, "Hey, this guy brought his son to you, and you couldn't heal him, so y'all must be a bunch of fakes. Or you're one of your followers of fake." And the disciples are having an argument with them. And I guarantee you, being a Christian, anytime that you mess up, there's going to be somebody around you that's your critic. Amen. There's always going to be somebody around there going, "Oh, I knew you weren't a Christian. I knew you'd mess up." So sure enough, here these disciples are faced with this. But here's what to do in that situation. Get your critic's eyes off of you and get your critic's eyes on Jesus. Because look what the next verse says. Immediately when they saw him, all the people were greatly amazed, and running to him, greeted him. The best thing that you and I can do is when we mess up or in our daily life is make sure people are always looking to Jesus. Now when he came down, what were they so amazed about? I'm guessing Jesus still has this glow about him from being on the mountain. Just like Moses did when he came off the mountains. They were amazed by that. Look at verse 16. It says, he asked the scribes, what are you discussing with them? Now, before they could even answer, listen. Look at verse 17. Then one of the crowd answered and said, Teacher, I brought to you my son who has a mute spirit. And whenever it seizes him, it throws him down, it foams at the mouth, gnashing his teeth, becoming rigid. So I spoke to your disciples, and they should cast it out, but they could not. That's why I think that's probably why the scribes and the disciples are arguing about that. Now, just moments ago, Jesus and 3 of his disciples were on the mountain, talking with Elijah and Moses. They hear this voice from heaven. Now, all of a sudden, they come down from the mountain, and they're faced with this turmoil. I'll never forget being a young Christian. We had went on a lay renewal with some people from our church. And when we'd get back on Sunday nights, we would give our testimony about what happened at lay renewal. And man, we're all fired up because we've seen lives change. We've seen people who were going to church and they realized that they weren't saved, come to know Christ. I mean, some of the situations we've been in, we've seen people who have been members for 20, 30 years, and they never realized they were lost. They come to know Jesus. I've seen people whose relationship was just, they sat over here, and that person sat over here. And then during that weekend, God would just bring those two individuals together, and that friendship would be made new again. I mean, you'd see wonderful things. You'd see people who would break down and just bawl because they'd realize they got some sin in their life. So we'd come back to our home church, and we were all fired up. I mean, we're excited, and we're telling the people about what we've seen and what we've experienced. And I remember being a young man and looking out into the congregation, and they were sitting there with their hands folded like, big deal. Now that will punch you in the gut because you're thinking, why aren't you excited about something that God's doing? So I can understand, I can kind of convey what must the disciples feel as they come down off that mountain and see this turmoil that they're in. Now, in Matthew, it says that this man knelt down before Jesus. It also says he calls him Lord. And this one he calls him teacher, which means somebody who's experienced, somebody that has knowledge, somebody that you'd want to listen to. So these are great compliments. He's calling him teacher, he's calling him Lord, and yes, I do believe he called him both things. Now he's come here to bring his son, and why has he come to bring his son? Because he knows that Jesus can do something. He's heard about all the other miracles that Jesus has done. He's heard about those. He may have even been a witness to some of them. We don't know. But for one other reason, we know that he brought his son. He knows something needs to change. This evil spirit, this mute spirit that he talks about, this is real, y'all. This is not some made-up story about the good and the evil. This is real. It's telling us what it happens to this young boy. That he foams at the mouth, that he gnashes his teeth. In other words, he's kind of grinding on them. He gets rigid, just kind of lays there still, almost dead-like. This is part of Satan's agenda. Satan's agenda. See, spirits, demons, were all to bring conflict. They are to do a mission for Satan. And that is to, well, what does John 10 say? The thief cometh not but for to kill, but to steal, kill, and destroy. That's their agenda. Demons are real. Evil spirits are real. In verse 19 it says, he answered him and said, O faithless generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I bear with you? Bring him to me. Now I know that seems harsh. But what he's saying here, especially to the disciples, he's getting frustrated because time and time again, he has showed that he has the power to do things. He's calmed the sea. He's made the dead to walk. He's made the blind to see. He's made the crippled not be crippled any longer. He's made those who cannot hear again. Those who have no eyesight, he made them see again. He has done all of these things. He's done all of these things to prove who he is. And yet, his disciples still have doubts. And I like the part where he says, bring him to me. Well, I like that. Your child lost. Jesus is bringing him to me. Your child make bad decisions. Bring him to me. Your child have an addiction. Bring him to me. Whatever your child needs, Jesus says, bring him to me. And I'm not just talking about your child. I'm talking about your wife. I'm talking about your husband. I'm talking about your grandchildren. I'm talking about your friend. I'm talking about your coworker. I'm talking about people you know and people you're in contact with. He's saying, bring him to me. Because he is the answer. And if you can't bring them to him physically, bring it to him in your prayers. You know, sometimes we've talked with our children and talked with our grandchildren and talked with our loved ones and talked with co-workers, and they still won't come. But they cannot stop you from praying for them. And that's all we need to do. Well, look at verse 20. It says, then they brought him to him, and when he saw him, now get this. Here's Jesus. Here is the boy. And when the boy sees him, now this is not the boy doing this. This is the evil spirit within him doing this. Look what it does. Immediately the spirit convulsed in him and fell on the ground and wallowed, foaming at the mouth. And he asked his father, how long has this been happening to him? And he said, from childhood. And I'll tell you today that Satan wants our children. They want our grandchildren. is an attack. And if we don't pray for them, if we don't witness to them, then we have let them down. We have failed them in the most miserable way. And look at verse 22, and he said, often he has been thrown him both into the fire and into the water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us. You see what the evil spirit's doing? He can't communicate, for one thing. But for the evil spirit, that's not enough. So the evil spirit makes the body do things it would not normally do. It falls into the water and could have drowned. And somebody has to save it. It falls into the fire and somebody has to go and physically remove that child away from fire. You see, the spirit has control over the body. And look at verse 23. He said, Jesus said to him, if you can believe. Now, what did the guy just say? If you can do anything. So he puts a stipulation on. He's got some faith, but he's put some stipulation. If you can. But Jesus, when he speaks to him, he flips it. He said, if you can believe, all things are possible to him who believes. The problem was not divine willingness to do it. The problem was with those who are calling on God to do it, not believing he can. And that's what we all struggle with. We all know in the back of our mind God can do things, but for some reason we get the thought, but what if he doesn't want to? What if it's not his will? We struggle with that. We wrestle with that. And what Jesus is saying, he said, if you can believe. Now this is not a claim it and grab it or whatever it's called. It's not one of those deals. It's believing in God who has the power to do anything. Now look at verse 24. Immediately the father and the child cried out and said with tears, Lord, I believe, but help my unbelief. Four friends bought a crippled man to see Jesus. It was so crowded they couldn't get into the house. So they got up on the roof and they tore the roof off and they lowered him down to where Jesus was. And you know what he said, what Jesus said? Not because of the man's faith. But he looked at them and he said, because of your faith. And the man was healed. Can we change people's situations on behalf of them? Yes. 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 If we'll believe in him. A woman who had a blood flow for 12 years, she'd spent everything she had. And she thought, if I can just touch the hem of his garment. And she did. And Jesus said, who touched me? The disciples are looking at it, and there's this whole crowd. What did he say to her? Be of good cheer, daughter. Your faith has made you well. Faith did it. Her faith, knowing that Jesus could change her life. Two blind men was following Jesus, crying out to him, have mercy on us, son of David. He says, do you believe I can do this? Yes, Lord. According to your faith, let it be done. They were blind no longer. That's what faith can do. It can change circumstances. I seen Jesus walking on the water. He called to Peter, and Peter stepped out of the boat. As long as he had his eyes on Jesus, he could walk. But as soon as he began to pay attention to the waves and the wind, he began to sink. Jesus said, "Oh, ye of little faith." I had to reach out and save him. Sometimes I think Jesus says that to us a lot. We're not paying attention. He says, "Oh, ye of little faith." I'm doing something. You may not see it. You may not realize it, but I'm doing something in that situation. I'm speaking to that heart. I'm speaking to that life. Trust me. Look at verse 25. It says, when Jesus saw the people came running together, Jesus does something very quickly here because he's not looking for attention. He wants to get this done before the crowd gets there. This is not for show. This is real. This is genuine. This is what this boy is facing. And so Jesus does this very quickly. He says, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, deaf and dumb spirit, I command you come out of him, enter him no more. Then the spirit cried out, convulsed him greatly, and came out of him. And he became like one dead, so that many said, is he dead? But Jesus took him by the hand, lifted him up, and arose. And when he had come to his house, his disciples asked him privately, why could we not cast it out? So he said to them, this kind can come out by nothing but prayer and fasting. In other words, our faith has to be strong. And the only way that it can be strong is through prayer and fasting. Do I believe in evil spirits? Yes. Do I believe in demons? Yes. Do I believe that there are evil spirits and demons living in our generation? Yes. Do I believe a person can be possessed by an evil spirit? Yes. When I hear people speaking outlandishly, outrageous, and that being accepted as normal, I shudder. It bothers me. Now, I know there's some mental illness out there. I understand that. But some of it is demon possession. Some of it's evil spirits. And y'all, these these evil spirits have an agenda. What is that agenda? To kill, steal, and destroy. And that means somebody's life. That means make as much problems for individuals as it possibly can. And for those who take care of them. For those who are close to them. So what can we do? I think the best thing we can do is pray. Pray for those who take care of them. Pray for those who have an evil spirit, because that's not that person doing that. And then pray for ourselves. Because I promise you, sooner or later, you'll come in contact with people who are evil. And you must be ready to speak on behalf of our Lord and Savior. We're going to have a song of invitation. 290, if you please stand.
Lost loved ones, just be with us as we go through this next week. Maybe just seek thee and the will you would have us with. Just be with us and give us where we fail. Rest on that. Amen.
Amen.